Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, happy hot summer here in New York City. I decided to take a week off of recording a new episode and instead want to bring you back to episode 267 of the podcast with Conrad Ricamora. I originally aired this episode a year ago on July 18th, 2023, when Here Lies Love had just opened, but you can catch Conrad on the Broadway stage again right now in Oh Mary, a show I desperately want to see since I've heard nothing but amazing things. Fingers crossed I can see it soon and bring you some more episodes from the cast. But in the meantime, please enjoy this episode from The Vault with Conrad Ricamora.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Our guest for this episode may be best known for his 6 seasons as in the role of Oliver opposite Viola Davis on the ABC network hit How to Get Away with Murder, or How to Travel All the Way to Mordor, as I say in this nerdy house. He has TV and film credits, including Fire Island, Over the Moon, Talladega Nights, and The Light of the Moon. Broadway, off-Broadway, and regional credits include The King and I, which was his Broadway debut, Little Shop, Soft Power, and countless plays penned by none other than Will Shakespeare. He is a 2016 Human Rights Campaign Visibility Award recipient and 2017 Equality California Award recipient, and can now be seen in the Broadway hit Here Lies Love, reprising his role of Aquino, which he developed 11 years ago in the original off-Broadway workshop. I will get into that. Conrad Ricamora, holy crap, man. Welcome to the Theater Podcast.
All right, thanks. It's good to be here.
So I want to just kick into this real quick and talk about the awards, because these awards are very cool. So the Human Rights Campaign Visibility Award, what is that?
Oh, it's from this the nonprofit organization, the Human Rights Campaign, which fights for rights for people in the LGBTQ plus community, and which surprisingly, or I guess maybe not surprisingly, have lately been under assault.
Not surprisingly.
In our very own country. But yeah, it was mainly for playing Oliver, who was an out HIV positive character on TV.
Did you get any sort of, I mean, this was 26 seasons, so it was what was How to Get Away with Murder? It was 2014 to 2020?
Yeah, 2014 to 2020. We wrapped like 2 weeks before everything shut down.
Wow. Well, that was good timing.
Yeah.
And I watched pretty much every episode with my wife. In 2014, I mean, unfortunately, still at that point, I think being an openly gay character living with HIV on TV in 2014 was still kind of a big deal, right? So did you get like any sort of weird feedback or unexpected criticism or anything from that sort of thing?
No, I felt like it was really welcomed. That was the response that I'm sure there was stuff that I didn't read or didn't see that was pushback on it. But oh yeah, I don't know. I feel like in general there was pushback because we showed some pretty. I was involved with some sex scenes on primetime network TV that was really pushing the boundary at the time, and I think that there were some comments about like, oh, this is why do we have to see this? And it's like, well, it's just about equality. It's just about showing, if there are heterosexual like sex scenes on TV, why can't the equivalent be shown in the same setting? Why is there a disparity? So that it's kind of, I was really proud of it because it normalized a lot of for a lot of people, not just gay characters, but that gay characters have sex lives, gay people have sex lives. And I feel like the show like normalized that and made people feel more okay with their own sexuality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I like that it is becoming normalized, and I enjoy when people of any sexual orientation just have a relationship and it's not a plot point. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not they're the sidekick because they're gay. It's just like this is somebody that just happens to be a human and have preferences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I get it. And was that did that lead into the other award as well, the Equality California Award?
Yeah, I mean, I think that because Murder was such a big hit that it was, all of these awards for visibility, I was very visible in every aspect in every sense of the word. So the awards recognized that, which, I was happy about because I didn't have that kind of visibility as a little gay boy growing up in the South. It was much needed when I was growing up in the 90s and just wasn't anywhere to be found. So yeah, I was happy to be providing that acceptance and visibility to people now.
So Here Lies Love is such an interesting show, and the fact that it was I mean, there's many things. In 2004, the concept album came out with David Byrne and Fatboy Slim co-created it, and it had 2 different runs off Broadway, and then it had a Seattle out of town. 2013, 2014 off Broadway, 2014 in London, 2017 in Seattle, and then now on Broadway.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a run. The first run at the public was 2013. And then the London run, I think, was after that. And then we went back to the public in 2014 because they couldn't find a space that would allow us to tear up the seats of a theater. And then 2017 in Seattle. But yeah, it had a hard time finding a home because it's so, I mean, you have to literally renovate a theater.
Right. So that was going to be one of my questions, was if you knew whether or not the original concept was to turn a massive stage into a nightclub.
No, I never asked David or Alex if that was the goal. I think that, and I'm guessing that it wasn't ever the goal because David just kind of creates without I feel like he creates without a specific end goal. It's my sense of the way his mind works and the way his creativity works is that he just follows his instincts and his impulses. It's not like he's like, he doesn't have a very commercial brain. It's not like he's like, we're going to sell out this Broadway theater. It's very much just like, this seems like a story that needs to be told. This seems like a concept. Oh, this person in history is really interesting. Oh my gosh, they went to Studio 54. Why these things need to exist together? Like this is a crazy like coincidence. So I don't think that he ever had like the end goal of a theater in mind.
Well, so I guess, how did you get involved back in the original workshops to originate this character, right? Because that was, like I said, 11 years ago.
Oh yeah, no, I was in my 3rd year of my MFA program at the University of Tennessee, and I was reading the New York Times, and I saw that they were developing this show about Imelda Marcos and the People Power Revolution in the Philippines, and that it was for people who had like pop rock voices, and that's kind of, I'm not like a classically trained singer. Like I mostly gravitate towards pop rock, R&B type music, and my voice kind of sits in that realm mostly as well. So I was like, oh my gosh, this, and my dad's from the Philippines. So I was like, I feel like I should be a part of this. And so I asked if I could fly up and go to an open call. And my professor said yes. Flew up and got into New York City at around 1 a.m., waited in line at 7 a.m. to for the open call, and got passed through, got asked to come back the next day, called my professor and was like, so they asked me to stay another day. Can I stay another day? And he said, yeah. Then I was in the room with Alex Timbers and David Byrne and the rest of the creative team. And then they asked me to come back the next day, and I was at school. My University of Tennessee is connected to an equity theater called the Clarence Brown Theater, and I was doing Kiss Me Kate, and we had a show, and we didn't have understudies, so I had to go back. But they were like, okay, that's fine. And then the next day, while I was in class, in my acting class, my phone rang, and it was a New York number. And I answered it, and they said I got the part.
Wow. So did you get to finish the semester then? Or
yeah. Because it just all timed out. Like, I graduated, and then the workshop started 2 weeks later after our showcase in New York.
Wow. Well, that's very fortunate.
Yeah.
All right, let's say they did it all for you. We'll go with that. Yeah, we'll go with that. And I want to back up again. We're going to talk about Here Lies Love so much because it intrigues me in so many ways. But born in Santa Maria, California, and so that's one side of the country. And then you grew up in Niceville, Florida. Niceville.
Yeah.
You got Pleasant. You got all sorts of fun things. Florida has
You are the
weirdest
first
names.
person to make that joke.
No, isn't there there's Sunshine. There's all sorts of weird things down
I think
there.
there's a Pleasantville, New York.
Isn't it? Yeah, something like that.
There's one nearby. I don't know.
But I know, and we'll talk about your dad's connection to the Philippines and actually the true history when we get back to Here Lies Love. But I want to, what brought you to California? What brought your family to California? And then how'd you get to move over to Florida?
Yeah, no, my dad came over from the Philippines when he was up 10 or 11. And then they started out in British Columbia and Canada, and then eventually settled down in Long Beach. And then he went into the military when he was 18. And then we just, after that, trotted all over to military bases. We lived in Iceland for a little while.
No kidding.
Yeah, and because there's an Air Force base in Reykjavik.
Right.
And then we lived in Denver. And then Florida, was middle school through high school was in Florida.
Interesting. So do you have a favorite place that you look back on in your childhood? Because continuing to live in Reykjavik would have made you a much different person.
Yeah. No, I still want to go back because I was pretty young, but I do have memories of it. But I really like Denver. We were there for 2 years, and I remember really liking it there.
Yeah. Oh, the mountains. I mean, you can't beat that. I love the West Coast for the same reason. You just have beach and mountains right there. And then Denver is just this clear air. And then Florida, screw Florida for many reasons.
I know. I mean, yeah, Florida's going through a lot of stuff.
Florida's going through a buttload of things. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the episode. Do you have a touch point in your life? Do you remember that moment where, I mean, you're traveling all the time. So what was that moment where you're like, oh, this is what I want to do to start performing, to get into film, to theater? And
no, I had no exposure to the arts at all because I was growing up on military bases, and it was very much machismo culture. Men and boys expressing themselves in any way was not just not allowed. And so even though I was traveling around and living in different areas, I was pretty much, our home base was the Air Force bases. And it wasn't until I went away to college that I went to the theater for the first time. And took an acting class there in my junior year of undergrad, and that's when it really kind of exploded for me. I mean, when I was a little kid, I liked to sing and dance, just in my bedroom and making up little routines. But then I remember a certain point around fifth, sixth grade when it was like, oh, this is very clear that this is no longer allowed, that I have to like, I'm going to get beat up every single day. And that was just the reality of, there was no outlet for it. So I couldn't, there was nowhere for me to put it.
That's interesting. I sort of had the reverse, because I as a little kid, I was in chorus and like boys chorus and some theater stuff in Clearwater, Florida. Like I was in Gainesville and then Clearwater, Florida. And then I moved to North Carolina, and I know you were in Charlotte at one point. I moved to Wilkesboro, North Carolina when I was about 10, I think, 10 or 11. Can't remember now. And in North Carolina, that's where I wasn't allowed to express myself anymore.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, Southern Florida is very different than North. I mean, the part of Florida I grew up in was right below Alabama. You drive 30 minutes north.
The Panhandle.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you're in Alabama in 30 minutes. So that area is very, very different than like Clearwater, St. Pete, Tampa, Miami, Gainesville, like Jacksonville, like Orlando, like all of those areas are very different.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel that. So then what was your original major then, if you didn't get into theater until junior year?
I was a psych major, and I played tennis really competitively. I went to undergrad on a tennis scholarship, and I really liked psychology. I liked the idea of the psychology of performance on a tennis court. To me was so fascinating, and what makes people get into this zone sometimes where they block out all of the noise, and what gets in the way sometimes, and these expectations of winning and losing, I found I ended up focusing mainly on sports psychology, and that was what I studied in undergrad.
That's so interesting. Sports psychology. And
yeah,
so
it translates into, I mean, it works, it not works, but it translates and is applicable to theater and to performing arts. It's the idea of if you're focused on how you're being perceived, or if you're focused on anything other than what you are doing, then you're going to be distracted or be like taken out of what you're doing. The concepts are applicable and transferable.
That's literally what I was about to say, and I equate Broadway to being the Olympics of theater. So you have to be an athlete in mind and body, and be so focused and so present to do your best, and to maintain the physical and the emotional rigor that it is required for 8 shows a week is insane.
Yeah.
So you could be the best singer in the world, but you can't do 8 shows a week, and like you go hoarse every other day, right?
I know. That's one of the things David told me when we were developing Here Lies Love 11 years ago. And he was like, oh yeah, like he wrote an initial song, and I was like, David, you realize I do have to do this 8 times a week? And he was like, oh, I didn't think about that. Because he, like, even pop stars, like, they do a concert, but then they have like the next night off, or the next 2-3 nights off.
Right. Yeah. I completely get that. And that's why when you see someone just like yourself, and the whole cast, I mean, really, gosh, today's Friday as we're recording this, I saw this Wednesday night, 2 days ago. Oh. And the cast, like, just everyone's singing their ass off, and in a way that I mean, when you objectively, you're like, oh, this is a good show, this is a really good show, and everyone's a great singer. But when you look at it and take a step back, and you're like, you have to do this and touch these places in your soul and in your psyche 8 times a week, and make it, because there's somebody who has not only not seen the show before in every single show, but there's also somebody who's never seen a Broadway show before. And so you're giving them that possible moment to change the course of their life, because they can get inspired by this.
Well, I never thought about it that way.
Well, there you go.
That's a lot of pressure.
No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah. No, I love, I mean, I just feel lucky that I get to do this for a living, honestly. Yeah, it's hard, but I mean, I just eternally grateful that I get to wake up and my day gets anchored around doing this, and I love that so much.
So this show, Here Lies Love, it's retelling of the true story of the People's Power movement and like the rise of the dictatorship in the 70s and the 80s in the Philippines. And it's gosh, I love the way that it's presented in so much as that it's like, hey, this happened here in America. Everything was just fine, and we didn't, fine, I put in air quotes, and we didn't really pay attention to it. And then now it's all happening again in multiple different ways. Like, if we don't do something about it, life's going to get really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know where to even begin with that.
Begin with your dad. Begin with your dad, because that's the connection I think you have to this.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It's funny. My dad doesn't talk. He's opened up since I booked Here Lies Love 11 years ago. He's slowly started to talk more about his time in the Philippines and about his life in general. But he's a pretty like quiet, reserved guy. Especially around like, me and my brother. He opens up more to my stepmom, but like to my brother and I, he's kind of just like stoic.
Well, it's hard, I suspect, because if you live through an exile or an exodus and an immigration like that, where your literal life was at stake, which we take for granted in a country like America all the time.
Yeah. Well, and there's somebody at the stage door last night was just like, and wasn't Filipino, and they were like, I had no idea about this history. And I was like, me neither. My dad came over here and very much wanted to assimilate and wanted to become as American as possible in order to survive and succeed. And so I think that's why he didn't teach my brother and I Tagalog or Visayan, the two dialects that he spoke in the Philippines, that he didn't teach us a word.
Wow.
When we were growing up, because I think that he came over and saw, how hard it is to make it here as someone who has an accent, someone who's from a different culture. And I mean, even today, it's the way that we treat, especially brown-skinned folks that come over to this country who have darker skin and speak with an accent or speak a different language. America has not been super kind,
and still to this day is. We think it was okay, and it was just swept under the rug. It wasn't clean. It wasn't improved. No.
Yeah. Well, and the Philippines was an American colony for many years, and so it's very much our histories with the Philippines and America are very much intertwined and interconnected and tangled up in a lot of knots in ways that this show is helping, I think, all of us in the cast untangle and make sense of our own identities for the first time.
Right. That's what I was going to ask about. Is it's an all-Filipino cast, which I think this is the first time that's ever happened on Broadway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So setting history there, and a lot of the cast is young, on the younger side, and like on the early to mid late 20s. 20s is younger.
Oh yeah,
right?
no, I remember you said that the show happened 11 years ago. Christina, who plays my wife in the show and other ensemble roles in the show, like the first week of rehearsal, she was like, "Oh yeah, when you guys did this at the Public, I was 11." And I just was like, get out.
I know.
Get out of here immediately.
I know. I know. Gosh, I was talking with it was like Victoria Clark or somebody the other day who's like, I'm literally in like I inspired people who were 10 at the stage door.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Now she's performing with them.
Yeah, well, I mean, Kimberly Akimbo was the first time I had seen her on stage, and
Phenomenal.
it was life-changing for me.
Such a great show, and she's such a great actress. And Bonnie Milligan for president. I mean, come on, that woman. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the episode. So, but what I was getting at was now you've got your castmates who are probably 2, if not 3 generations removed from from this actual historical event and the events of that time period, who didn't, like you said, maybe didn't even know about it, or who have parents or heritage that didn't talk about it.
Yeah,
because it was so hard, and I'm seeing a lot of this trend, right? And like even like my Ramin Karimloo is a buddy of mine, and he won't talk about his family's exile from Iran. Like his dad, he's like, that's my dad's story. I know a little bit about it. My dad doesn't talk about it. He doesn't, like there's so much, I guess, sadness and everything that goes along with it. But for you and your cast, have you been able to like sit down and talk about it and identify with it in any way?
Well, I think the way that we identify it is exactly what we were talking about a little earlier, is that it's so urgent in our own country right now to learn this history and learn how democracy in another country was, so easily turned upside down and taken away. Things that we have taken for granted for so many decades in this country, just having the right to vote, the right to choose our leaders, and then through our show, through Here Lies Love, to see how quickly that can be manipulated and taken away, is something that I think we all feel is very tenuous right now in our own lives. So that's the connection. That's, our parents can still have their stories, but it's our job right now to learn from different pasts, different histories, and different governments. And right now we're doing that with Here Lies Love with the Philippines, to see how fragile our own democracy is. Yeah.
No, I get that, because I was going to say, imagine, in an alternate universe, the January 6th insurrection was successful.
Yeah.
And so in some parallel universe, we now have a dictatorship or a martial law of sorts where administration didn't accept the outcome and then they just took over and that's it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it's still having effects on, people who are members of the LGBTQ community, with the Supreme Court that was put into place from the previous administration. It feels like our rights are still being taken away. People who benefited from affirmative action, which was put into place because people of color were denied and certain rights and certain weren't allowed into certain spaces. To see that being walked back now is sobering.
On to a lighter note. I love how at the beginning of Here Lies Love, the DJ, which is he's not actually controlling the music, right? He'll just
Or is he?
Or is he? All right, we'll start that rumor. The DJ is actually DJing. Says like karaoke. Filipino brought the culture brought karaoke over to the States, and here we are setting the stage, pun intended, for this wonderful nightclub that we are now watching the story unfold in. So the original workshops, I never had the fortune of seeing it off Broadway, either time. But when you figured out, or when you were told or shown concept or of what Broadway was gonna be, Was that something that you were like, oh yeah, this is cool, or like, holy crap, what are we gonna do with this? Because I imagine as a performer, it's so unusual to literally be in the midst of a crowd of people and walking among them and through them and above them and having them look down on you. Like I was literally, I was seat A1 on the side of the stage behind what would be the proscenium, looking down on people's heads, the performers' heads.
Yeah. I mean, because I've done it so many times now, I got used to it early on, but I do remember like the first, at Williamstown, and then the first run at the Public, just being like, well, I have no idea what this is going to feel like when we get out on stage. I have no idea how people are going to react when we're, brushing up against them as we run through the audience. And, but let's see. And luckily it was received, really, really positively. Yeah, in terms of it happening in a proscenium, it doesn't really happen in a proscenium anymore. We've completely transformed a Broadway theater into a nightclub, and I think that's the cool thing, is that we've transported people who are walking into a Broadway theater, and you can feel people's excitement to see the space and be in the space for the first time. That it's just you're completely transported to a Studio 54 type club.
My jaw hit the floor. Like as soon as I went through the doors past the box office, I was just like, this is insane. And there's coat check right there, just like a regular club, right? Because you're on the dance floor. You don't want big bags or coats hanging around. But then you go through, and it was so cool for me to walk. You're walking basically through the wings to get onto the dance floor, to go back out into what traditionally would be backstage. And what I said about the proscenium earlier is, from my seat, if I look straight up into the fly, I'm looking at the backside of where the original proscenium was.
Yeah, which is kind of cool, because you can see like the bones of the theater, but then you can see what we've transformed it into. Oh,
it's so cool.
Yeah.
And do you have a contingency plan if the set pieces don't move? Have you gone through plan B and plan C for that stuff?
We just hold. But
hold.
It's only happened so far. It's only happened once.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Greg, our stage manager, gets on the God mic, and it's just like any show. Yeah, the stage manager just gets on the mic and says, "Actors hold."
Yeah. Oh, it's so cool though, and I love the use of the projections and the lights, and I mean the whole thing is beautiful. It is such a beautiful set, and the music, of course, David Byrne and Fatboy Slim, equally great, and the story itself, again, amazing. But coming out of, I guess we're still in previews now as we're recording this. So the show is it still being tweaked, or are you mostly set at this point?
Mostly set. They're small. I mean, up until a week ago, we completely restaged one of my numbers where I start in the mezz, and that was wild. But yeah, I feel it's starting to feel like, okay, we've found what this version of the show is, and you can feel it crystallizing now, and I can see in the creative team when we come to rehearsals every day that it's like I can feel their excitement about we've taken this big leap. I would think that like this past Sunday and Monday's shows, you could feel like, okay, something has clicked.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, and now it's just diction.
Yeah, diction.
Stuff like that. Like
you can really lean into your roles now because you're not thinking about where to go so much.
Yeah. And opening. That's the thing that I always find it interesting in this part of part of the process, when in previews and as previews start to wind down into, opening and freezing the show, as a actor, you kind of have to really start taking the reins over from the creative team and being like, no, I have to own this now. I need, like, I really have got to, and in times like pushing back and being like, well, I know what you're saying, but from my experience on stage, this is what the experience is, and this is how, if you change, if sometimes I feel like creative teams can start getting a little bit like bored, and so they're looking for something that's change, and you're like, well, if you change this one little moment, you are not thinking about the way I've created this arc, like through all of these separate other beats. It changes the next beat and the next beat and the next beat, and you really, I think, have to start sticking up for your character as previews start winding down and being like, okay, it's time to solidify this and shut it down.
Like you have to lock your own psyche. Yeah. Have you had any fun experiences with the audience being so close? Because I imagine that would be a little nerve-wracking for people who, maybe introverts specifically, who are like, don't touch me, but maybe those people aren't buying dance floor tickets anyway.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, now there's nowhere to hide from us because we're up in the mezz now.
Yes, I know.
So, yeah, I've learned to read people really quick. I mean, this is also where my military background, growing up on Air Force bases and moving around so much, you learn to read people really quickly. And so now in the show, I can see in the audience with a quick scan who wants it to be approached and who definitely does not want to be approached. And I just don't approach those people.
I think it's funny where the camera, so the first time the camera is going through the audience, like you have a live camera taking footage, and then there's like pulling up actual people to be the girlfriends and whatnot, like to be on camera, and everyone's like, yeah, so awkward. Yeah. That was one of my favorite moments. But I think it's just brilliant. I enjoy it. I enjoy it so much. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to the episode. Before we get into the 3 closing questions I ask everybody to wrap up the episodes, I want to quickly talk about Wilbur and Presley.
Oh, Wilbur and Presley. Well, Presley's meowing in the background now.
So your cat and your dog, and there's a lot of Presley's the dog, right?
Presley is the cat.
Presley's the cat. The latest Instagram picture you posted of the two of them together just gets me, because I love cats who sit like people.
He is the funniest. Just like, it's a self-made like he creates his own chair and he just sits on himself.
Big cat butt. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So first closing question for you. Just what motivates you?
Storytelling and connecting through stories.
If you could give advice to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path, what would you say?
Oh, down a similar path. I would just say focus on the work. I feel like there's so much noise in life that if you like what you do, then focus on what that is. And in terms of, I guess, in acting and in the entertainment industry, finding out what the actual work is, and then letting go of all of the rest of it, and also not partaking in too much of, because there's so much just hype around what we do, and enthusiasm, which is great, but it's also like, okay, what is the work? What is that we're doing?
And remind David Byrne that you have to perform 8 times a week.
And that.
Yes. All right. Last question then. If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Ooh, one show for the rest of my life, but I could see it as many times as I want. Oh boy. Um, I recently went and saw with my husband, we went and saw Hades Town, and just I love that. I saw it at New York Theater Workshop, and then brought the Broadway run, and then Eva Noblezada is still in it, and
Mhm.
she is unreal. I mean, I love the show in general, but she is really Presley.
I hear the
Stop
cat. I
meowing.
know.
Oh my
Presley's back there.
yeah, but Eva Noblezada in Hadestown, I could watch over and over and over again. I just think that she is like unreal.
I agree with you. And speaking of songs that need to be reminded that they need to be performed 8 times a week, Anais Mitchell wrote Orpheus, right? Reeve Carney's,
yeah.
but he wrote Orpheus' role in her own range, like a female range, just because that's all she knew to do. And then all of a sudden it's like stupid high for men.
Oh yeah.
And she's like, oh, I didn't even think about that. But then you can get people like Reeve who just knock it out.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah,
It's great.
it's insane to watch him do that.
Amazing. So where can we find you online on the socials?
At Conrad Ricamora on Instagram, and now the new Threads. I
Mhm.
just signed up. And yeah, it's just at Conrad Ricamora. I think I'm not really on TikTok, but I think it feels strange to be talking about TikTok at 44 years old. But it's at Conrad Wayne Ricamora. But that I probably post a video every 6 months.
I found I actually did this after Here Lies Love. I took a bunch of little videos of different parts of walking in, and then just said auto cut. And,
oh, really?
And it made the reel I've got up there now. And I swapped out the music with the Here Lies Love concept track, from 2004.
Oh,
But
cool.
then, yeah, like the auto cut, I'm like, I'm going to do this more often because I'm a
Auto
42-year-old man who doesn't want to learn TikTok either.
Well, now
So-
I have to revisit. I didn't even know about AutoCut.
I didn't even learn about auto cut, boy.
Oh no, dang.
Yeah, cool.
All right, I gotta go to rehearsal.
All right, man. You can get more of me on Threads now, too, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Leave a rating, review, tell your friend, go see Here Lies Love. Thanks to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and outro music you're hearing now. And Conrad, thank you most of all. This has been so much fun getting to know you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.